Ah, yes, Saturdays. They were a special time for us kids of the 80s. No school, no homework, just a day for us to be kids. Saturdays would start with a ritual that's long gone. Cartoons were on almost every channel starting before the sun rose and would last until about noon. We'd make our way from our beds half asleep to our living rooms with a quick stop in the kitchen for some sugary cereal submerged in milk. We'd park ourselves in front of the TV with the dial just close enough to reach by hand so we'd be able to change the channels looking for our favorite Saturday morning cartoons. We'd park our behinds on shag carpeting that was usually brown, green, orange, or yellow until the movie matinees or other programming would start and the cartoons would end. But when the cartoons ended, the fun didn't. We'd ride our bikes, BMXs, or 10 speeds, or if you were like me, a simple bike with a banana seat around the neighborhood. We knew every corner, obstacle, and jump in those neighborhoods. Sometimes we skinned our knees or bloodied our noses, but adventures and fun were always had. Other times, especially on those rainy days, we'd play with our favorite toys, imagining heroes and villains colliding in epic battles, as we'd witness on TV that morning when we watched our favorite cartoons. We told stories with our play and created memories that would last a lifetime. Who knew that cheap pieces of plastic would become so integral to our childhood memories? So much so that, as adults, we're willing to spend enormous amounts of money and enormous amounts of time to acquire the toys we had as children that evoke the memories of our childhood. From He-Man to the Transformers, from the A-Team to Rambo, from the Superpowers to Mask, from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to LJN wrestlers. We all had our favorites, and I certainly was no different. But on my 10th birthday in 1985, I would receive my first figure from this toy line that would change everything in my toy play world. I was blown away by it. From the day forward, the only toy I'd ask for every birthday, every Christmas, and every other day of the year until I was too old to play with toys was G.I. Joe. A few years ago, just after COVID, I began reacquiring some of those figures, and the memories those simple but not so cheap pieces of plastic brought back were priceless. At first, I was going to collect the ones I had, then it was the ones I wanted but never had, then it was the ones that friends and family had because it brought childhood memories of them, and then, well, as all collectors know, once you start, it never stops, and my G.I. Joe collection just kept growing. So with that said, enough talk. Let me show you my G.I. Joe collection. Yes, this is my G.I. Joe collection. Today, due to time, I thought I would just concentrate on my Cobra collection. Because my G.I. Joe collection, when I was 10 years old, all began with this Fang. This was the vehicle that I purchased, or better yet, my mother purchased for me on my 10th birthday. You see, as I was 10, my mother took me to our local London Drugs, similar to a CVS in the States, and said, go ahead and pick out a toy. I picked out a Fang, didn't come with a driver, so she said, go ahead and pick out a figure. And instead of picking out some figure that made sense, like Major Blood or a Cobra Trooper, I picked out an eel. And why does a frogman make sense? Well, when you're 10 years old, a frogman flying a helicopter is going to make sense. So that's who I purchased, and that was my first G.I. Joe that I received. Plus, when you removed his accessories, the Cobra Eel looked like a ninja. And when you're 10 years old, at least back in 1985, there was nothing cooler than a ninja. The reason I picked the Cobra Eel was simple. It came with a lot more accessories than any other figure that just happened to be on the peg that day, and that's the one that came home with me. So that was the start of my obsession with G.I. Joe, and I collected. And I had many figures, not as many figures as the ones you see here, but I did have about 20 or so G.I. Joe and Cobra when I was a kid. Of course, now being an adult, I have much, much more. When I was also a kid, I also collected the G.I. Joe comics. And these three, with about 50 other comics that I have, are originals that I purchased when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. And these are the ones that I would take my $1.75, walk to my local comic book store, and I would buy. I've decided to display three of them because, well, the cover is just so cool. I have Serpentor with the Baroness that tells the story of the Cobra Civil War. I have the coolest of all G.I. Joes, Snake Eyes, and his cover. And as well, I have Cobra Commander in issue number 100. As you can see, my collection has grown and it continues to grow. These are the figures that I currently have, and these are my Cobra figures. As you can see on the top shelf, I have my favorite of all of the Cobras, that being Storm Shadow. Yes, Tommy Arashikage, for those of you that know, he is my favorite figure. And when I saw this fellow, as white as he was, as pristine as he was, on eBay, I had to purchase him. Of course, I also purchased Cobra Commander, the hooded Cobra Commander, which of course, due to political reasons, unlikely that we'll ever see any recreation of that hooded Cobra Commander anytime soon. As well, we have the armored Cobra Commander, which is the original that I had as a child. That is the very figure, one of very few figures that has lasted this long, for about almost 40 years now into my adulthood. I also decided to purchase the Reaction Plus figure of Cobra Commander. The reason why? Two reasons really. One, the cost. He's much cheaper than getting the original. And number two, it just looks, I think, much cooler than the original, as it's designed to look like the cartoon version. I purchased also Dr. Mindbender. That is an original. The cape isn't. It's a repro, which I have a fellow that I use who lives in Spain, apparently, and I buy most of my repros from him. Also, the same with Serpentor. His cape as well is not an original. The Baroness, one of my latest figures that I received this Christmas, is also one of my favorites. The Destro, absolutely love this Destro. This is Destro number 3. I think that he looks much more on brand to the cartoon version than the original Destro. The troopers that you see below are all reaction figures, and again, the reason why I decided to army build with these instead of the originals is because of cost. Much cheaper, and they look really good, and they are more reflective of the cartoon version than the actual toy version, which came out in 83 and 84. As you can see, I do have an officer there, and again, probably costs more than the rest of the troopers that I have there. I have a Firefly, absolutely great looking Firefly. I don't have his telephone or his little receiver, but I do have as a complete. Of course, I have a bat, and this is my original bat from when I was 11 years old. The crotch piece, of course, is broken. The chest plate is a repro that I got off eBay, and so too is the backpack and the 3 pieces that are in it. The one that he currently has on his right arm is the original that came with the figure back in 1986, I believe it is. So that's the original one that I had as a child, that I played with as a child. And of course, I have a few other Cobras: a Motor Viper, a Snow Serpent, Televiper, Crimson Guard, and a Viper, which I had as a child. I have a Trouble Bubble back there as well, which is something that I never had as a child, but I always wanted. And I have a Strato Viper because I did have the Strato Viper as a child. I also had the Raven. I don't have a Raven. I don't plan on getting one. Just way too big to put into my collection. I have a couple of eels, and again, just my favorite out of all of them because it was my first. I have a lot of memories of playing with those. And of course, we have the Dreadnoks. We have all the Dreadnoks except one. I still have to get that last figure, but I do have them here. Ripper and Buzzer, and of course these two out in front, Monkey Wrench and Torch. These are originals that I had as a child. and certainly they've lasted this long, and they're gonna stick around. I would never sell those two figures in particular. I have a Zartan as well, and Zartan is not complete because very expensive figure, but I do have the majority of the pieces. Well, I don't have the majority of the pieces. I'm missing the majority of the pieces. I have a Thrasher, and one of my favorite that came out in 1987 was Zanzibar. My collection is mostly from 83 to 86, but Zanzibar is such a cool figure, from his hair to his weapons, that is something that I just had to get, and I got him as an adult. Xandar, of course, is next to him, and then there's Zorano. Zorano's not the original, as you can see, standing next to Rampage. That is the figure that came with the Transformer G.I. Joe combo of Soundwave that transforms into the Thunder Machine. And she came with it, and I thought she looked really great, so decided to put her in the display. And of course, you have Major Blood at the end. Those are that's part of my G.I. Joe collection. I do intend to show the rest of my G.I. Joe collection in the upcoming Saturday Nostalgia episode, so stay tuned. And Yo Joe.